has Mom taught us? What's important to Mom?
Important to my mom? What's important to my mom is, I think, the power, to know the power of what we have as individuals, also taught to us by tribal people, our leaders, our family, our mentors. I think education, teaching one about all the things that become of value to us, to the family. It might be different in other communities, but for us it's more the traditional values. That's what's important, I think, to my mom.
Do you know that language is still alive and still fluent? Are you aware of how rare that is?
I am aware of how rare that is. I'm not a fluent speaker. I have the privilege of hearing a lot of the languages, but in the Pomo culture, we have many different dialects. There are 7 major dialects. And so sometimes we get a mixture of people speaking differently. My mom speaks a couple different dialects, and my dad's side is just another Pomo band. They speak a different dialect. So I know how rare it is because we don't have a whole lot of fluent speakers. I'm really lucky that I have aunts and my mom and other relatives that are fluent, and we're still able to learn.
What's important, because you and your mom work with a lot of children, what's important to impart to them about culture, about family?
Yeah, you're right. We work with the Indian Child Welfare Act. We implement that as court advocates. We serve many tribes, so we have to be aware of a few things within those tribes. We have to be mindful that we're serving in governments, tribal governments, so we have to know the history of each of those tribal governments and how they're governing themselves. We also have to know how to preserve that, how to keep that intact, and with the traditional element, the cultural part that I think, which really grounds all of us in our everyday work, that allows us to really be free with knowing what we know about who we are, and we're able to allow other people to learn about who they are and where they come from, and be respectful in that way. But I think the children that we work with, and because of historically what's happened throughout the past with tribal people, we have generations of people that really have lost touch of their traditions and culture because of forced issues upon them. And so we have gaps of some children and families that might not know certain things, and we always welcome the idea of helping to reintroduce that and make sure that they reconnect with their families, or at least have somebody within their life that they can look to for spiritual guidance.
For this, what is the hope of this next generation, these children that you're working with, your mom are working with? What do you hope for them?
My hope for the children? Well, I think I'm hopeful for the leaders. I'm hopeful for the tribal leaders today to step up and to recognize that that's in their hands. They have the ultimate power, the authority, not only within their tribal governments, but they also have that respect of their people, of the communities they represent. And in order to be a good leader, you have to, properly assess who your community people are, and you need to know their needs. Our children's needs sometimes are not met because I don't think people are taking proper assessments of the kids and their need. And so, it's like a family. If you don't know what your family's doing, then your children are going to be out doing other things that you wouldn't appreciate. But our children need other people in their lives, and I think our leaders need to step up and fill that gap for some of our parents and people who are absent in our children's lives. Overall, our children need more than one influence. They need a community. They need multi-tribes to step in and assist one another, like we do in our communities. We work with a lot of different tribes, and we serve them because that's where the calling is. Could a federal government have the kind of impact people like
you and your mom have without, if you didn't have sovereignty? Could another outside entity or government organization do the kind of work that you do?
I think the federal government, similar to how tribal government functions, if they're not properly assessing their own nation, how can they assess nations within a nation? And that's really becoming very intricate because we're at the core of what we believe is valuable, whereas the nation, United States nation, I think they have different values, and so they value different things than we do. So I think there's a lot of issues that we raise based on our own cultural and communal values. I don't know that they can solve our issues because, one, they don't know the people they represent. If they're representing a melting pot of people, then they need to go out and properly assess who those people are and what their individual needs are. And of course those needs change as the environment changes, as social changes, as our kids are being educated in, you know, this era. Everything's moving so quickly, and the influences that are coming in are not things that we've worked so hard to preserve. And so it makes it a little bit more difficult to serve tribal people because I think we are holding on to a lot of 1,000-year-old traditions that are alive and well. And we have to kind of walk in the mainstream and walk in the traditional sense. And you know, sometimes, you know, we're not sure when to apply that and when not to. So it makes it a little challenging. So I'd imagine the federal government is not going to have any idea on how to address that.
Do you feel a sense of urgency with this next generation that's coming out? It seems like there is starting to be a rebirth of language, a reconnection with culture and traditions. Where are we at with this next generation?
I think that new generations today, looking as a person in her 40s, you know, I know when I was growing up, I felt very rounded because I knew a lot of my traditional values and traditional ways. But now that I'm older and I'm a parent, I know that the things that are happening right now with our youth, because our tribal governments are stronger, because they're much more capable economically, socially, physically, you know, they have governments now that are serving those interests, that are addressing, you know, the issues that they couldn't decades ago. When I was growing up, we didn't have somewhere to go to. Now we have tribal governments that are viable, that are interested in, you know, creating a governance for their people, and so they're assembling in those ways and making themselves stronger, so that they are able to provide, you know, educational class, regalia making classes, songs, song classes, all those things that are important to the community. So kids can learn that.
How did you learn how to make your regalia for your sermons and your dances? How did you learn?
How did I learn that? Being raised around it, and seeing it as an everyday event, thing happening, growing up with it. I mean, I think sometimes we take for granted that there are steps that need to be taken, but having people like my mom and my aunts and my grandmother, other spiritual people, we know that certain things have to be done at certain times of the year by certain people for certain reasons. And you learn that almost like you learn how to tie your shoes, almost like you learn how to recite the ABC. You know, it's an everyday thing that's ingrained in you. So eventually it becomes a real normal process, and then we're able to, you know, just extend a hand out to whoever doesn't know how to do something, and then we're able to help them with those things. But my mom is the best teacher that I've ever had. My dad as well, but my mom in particular. She taught us, at least the women in my family, a lot of the dressmaking, regalia making. And then my brothers and uncles and other relatives taught us all the other beadwork, headwork on a lot of the other dance gear.
Language, tradition is a chain. It's all connected. If you break that chain, what happens?
Well, it's not just with language. I think it's with all the gifts and all of the teachings. if we forget how to pray, if we forget who we honor, if we forget that our families come together at these times, if we forget a ceremony, if we forget certain things that, you know, have existed, they die. If they're not nurtured, then they die. If we don't teach somebody, generations after me, who's going to carry on? I firmly believe that the welfare, not just the wellness of our people, but the welfare of our people, it has to do with things that we've fought all of our lives to preserve. The language, the prayers, the songs, the stories, the arts, the respect, the value, all those things. And if it goes away, so do our traditions, or so do the livelihood of our people.
It was just a generation ago that there were people that were punished for speaking language. People punished, beaten for upholding tradition. Why do you think that there was an attempt to try to kill them?
Well, it's not just in the United States. That's happening all over the world. Any body of people, any Aboriginal people all over the world, that's what happens when colonization occurs. You have a dominant society that comes in and says, we know how to do it better. And whether that's with religion, or whether that's just with politics, or whether that's just in race. You have people that believe that their values and their ways are superior. And in what I've grown up with, I've never experienced hearing my relatives say anything like that, that we're better or we're worse, or we should feel this way or not feel that. We've always felt very confident because we were always provided to be self-empowered. This is who you are. You're rich, you're beautiful, you're powerful, you know, and you need to tell people that. You've got these wonderful things that no one can take away from you. You're not going to learn it in school. You're not going to learn it from your neighbor. You're not going to learn it in a book. These are things that were passed down to you orally. And that's the historical, I think, relationship that we have as tribal people in this community, in this county, in this state, in this part of the world. And they can't ever take that away from us.
That's it.